5 o'clock. We are on the road today. I'm at my father's house and my niece Brittany's house as well. They live together. And I'm here with my beautiful sister, Jeananne. Thank you for agreeing to be on.
Thank you.
So I wanted to talk as a follow-up to the hit that I did earlier this week on Fox News about this University of Utah student, Lauren McCluskey, who was murdered by her ex-boyfriend. This case really infuriates me, and I figured I'd have my sister, who's a phenomenal educator herself, give us her perspective. You may remember this case. What happened was she broke up the relationship with this guy. It turns out he was a convicted sex offender who actually spent 10 years in state prison. She did not know that. That is a really substantial sentence for a sex offender. He was on parole. He had 2 parole violations. Now, what happened in this particular case is she became concerned about some erratic, crazy behavior, including harassment. She reported it, I believe it was close to 6 times, to the university campus police department. They did nothing with regard to the investigation. They didn't even do as much as even go out for an interview to interview her. In fact, she got so concerned she called the Salt Lake City Police Department, but they didn't have jurisdiction over the case because the university police are the ones that were supposed to deal with this. Well, she gets murdered by the guy. And here, that's bad enough. But here's what's really infuriating. They did an investigation on this case, an independent investigation, and Jeanine, that independent investigation showed that they didn't have the proper policies. Policies they had were not followed through. She was not interviewed personally. Every time she called in, she had to file a new report and re-explain to the person from the police department for the university that scenario again. She was getting absolutely no services, no protective orders. I cannot believe, Jeanette, in 2018, we have worked so hard in the law enforcement community. No woman, or man for that matter, but women typically, should have to call 6 times to be heard. Now, Jeanette, this is what really got me when I'm upset about this case. The president of the university, who is a female, and I think that's a relevant fact here, after that blistering investigation, came out with a press release that said she is not going to discipline anyone for any malfeasance whatsoever because she doesn't believe that anything they could have done could have prevented the murder. That is such a tone-deaf response. What about the woman who may be in fear? How about women who just are nervous, need services, need support? How many other women on that university campus, Jeanine, have filed complaints that have not been properly investigated? Do we have to wait till somebody gets murdered until somebody pays attention to this? Let me have a suggestion for you, Madam President. I believe you should look in the mirror if you want to go to the #1 person who is to blame for this. And the fact that you sit there and you say that there's nothing that could have prevented the murder is an insult to all of us who have worked so hard to eradicate domestic violence. Your students, this victim, the community deserves better. You should resign. Jan, what do you think as an educator about, do you agree with this, like the tone deafness or something like that? Isn't it shocking?
It really boggles my mind because as a person who works for a state university in New Jersey, we're required to take training in Title IX every year, and we are required reporters. So the fact that 6 calls were made, I'm sure she obviously spoke to people, university personnel, and nothing was done, is clearly a violation. At least in New Jersey, it would be a violation of that policy.
Yeah, and the excuse that's given, and this is like, where you're doing your media or your press releases is amazing to me. This should be clear. He was on parole. He doesn't have a right to be on parole. I mean, he may have a right to be on parole, but he can be taken off the streets like that for any complaint. No proof beyond a reasonable doubt. You don't need to have probable cause. Those parole officers have a tremendous amount of power. So how about this, Jeanine? Do you think a parole officer who's supervising a guy who's been in jail for 10 years, has already 2 parole violations, hears that a woman is being harassed by the guy, don't you believe he would have been in handcuffs in a second?
Absolutely. And as a mother of 2 daughters, it's really frightening to me. When I sent my kids to college, I felt that the university had a responsibility to the safety of my children, and it's a terrible situation.
Yeah, well, I'll go back to my days in college at Providence College, which was a very conservative, strict school. They had those safety precautions and were way ahead of that curve all the way back in those days. And in 2018, it's amazing me. One last anecdotal note, I have my father off screen here to the right. We're going to just swing that camera over there a little bit. The great Angelo Buddy Bianchi, there he is. Dad, what are your thoughts about this?
I think it's horrible. And frankly, I think that the president of the university should be fired immediately.
Right, and because you would agree, and we've done a lot of civil rights cases together, right. If they keep that president on, they are essentially sanctioning, agreeing with her comments. And if, God forbid, another woman falls into the same kind of scenario and is either injured or preyed upon or whatever, they're going to go right back to that board of directors for the school and they're going to say, you had advanced warning and you kept this woman in place and now we have another person victimized. Do you agree that could be a basis for a civil suit?
Oh, I think it's a basis for a civil suit right now, based upon the facts that you've elucidated. The fact that the dean, the president, says, oh, there's nothing we could have done, that's silly. And they violated the policy. I think there's a suit right now.
Right. Well, unfortunately, the only good thing I can say about the Lauren McCluskey case is that she brought attention to a subject that I can't imagine we're even talking about in 2018 having to bring attention to. I want to thank my super guest, my sister Ann Bianchi Slusarczyk, and the great Angela Buddy Bianchi. Next week, 5 o'clock, Bianchi Law Talk. If you like this video, and I think to my sister's point, this should be shared. So all you know, you got to take personal responsibility because those who you think are going to be protecting you may not be. So this is a lesson to be learned to the extent that it is. But we would hope that you would share this, or if you get an opportunity, go on Bianchi Law Talk on, I'm losing my train of thought here, Bianchi Law Talk on YouTube, and subscribe. I'll see you next Sunday at 5 o'clock. Maybe I'll have the same guests on, maybe I won't. You have a great week. Happy New Year.